So, warm greetings from Diabetes Club of Dindigul to all the delegates present here. Today, diabetes is a major global health problem. The pandemic, COVID, and diabetes are posing us many new challenges like mucormycosis, new onset of diabetes, severe COVID pneumonia, and many more. With the vision to educate all the doctors of the different specialty about the global disease of diabetes, our Dindigul Club of Diabetes was started 8 years ago by our patrons. And even this pandemic don't stop us from marching towards our vision. And today we have our 101 scientific program of DCD. I call upon our Vice Chairman, Dr. Kamaraj, to deliver the welcome address.
Good evening to all. I would like to start by wishing you and your family for best and safety during this crisis period. On behalf of the Diabetes Club of Dindigul, I would like to cordially invite our chairman, Dr. Anbuchelvan sir, and Honorable Secretary, Dr. Anita Madam, and the Honorable Finance Secretary, Dr. Satish Kumar sir, moderators, patrons, and speaker of the day, Dr. Shanmugha Sundar, consultant endocrinologist, Magna Court, Chennai, to this virtual meet regarding the hydroxychloroquine, a therapeutic choice in diabetes mellitus. I also would like to extend my warm welcome to all those who have joined this meeting, various cities and time zones. Also would like to invite our sponsors and organizing committee for this meet. Finally, I welcome everyone attending this virtual meet in spite of busy schedule and COVID crisis. Hope you will be graced with the best therapeutic updates. Welcome all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam.
And this is message from the desk of secretary. We had our 100th CME of our Diabetes Club of Dindigul last month, commemorating the 100 years of insulin. We had many wonderful presentations by the great teachers, Dr. Shanmugha Velu and Dr. K.M. Prasanna Kumar on the older and newer insulin therapy. Our patrons, Dr. Muralidharan and Dr. J.C. Sekhar sir, presented on dapagliflozin as well. And then we had our investiture ceremony. Our patrons, Dr. Madhiselvan sir, Dr. Rajalakshmi ma'am, Dr. Muralidharan sir, and Dr. J.C. Sekhar sir passed on the legacy of the DCD to the new office bearers. Here are the few pictures of the 100th CME of our DCD. I would also like to tell you about few works that are in pipeline. This is our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Soon you will be receiving post links from our DCD FB and your YouTube channel. Another work in progress is our e-journal. These are the contents considered for our journal. There should be a main article, real case scenario, quiz corner, asks the expert, memories, tidbits on diabetes mellitus, and diet taboos. I request all our members to contribute for the journal, and our first e-journal will be published soon, probably by next week. And moving on to our today's CME, the 101 scientific program. Today, it's about hydroxychloroquine, a therapeutic choice in diabetes mellitus. We have our moderator and our patron, Dr. J.C. Sekhar sir, to introduce the speaker and the topic.
Thank you, ma'am. Hello, greetings to every one of you. It's my great pleasure to be here with you this evening as a moderator. I thank the active Executive Club of Diabetes Club, who assumed the office, and this is first meeting. It's a matter of great privilege for me to be the chairperson, to be called as the moderator for this meeting. I thank the new office bearers with a lot of zest. They are planning all Facebook and YouTube and e-journals. I wish them all the very best in their endeavor, and we'll be with you. The new team will always be with you. Our support will be with you always. And the topic of today is how to use hydroxychloroquine in the treatment of diabetes mellitus. For a long time, we've been knowing that diabetes mellitus is a chronic inflammatory disease. Right from the pathophysiology of pathogenesis of diabetes, the progression of its of the disease as per se and its complications, all these have been attributed to chronic inflammation changes, which occurs over a period of years. And this drug, hydroxychloroquine, which came into clinical use in the year 1955, it was substituted for chloroquine, which was more toxic. This was accepted more gleefully, hydroxychloroquine. And over the years, it has proved to be not only an anti-malarial, but also a good anti-inflammatory agent. It reduced platelet aggression, adhesions was able to reduce. It was able to bring down the lipid level. It was able to prevent endothelial damage. All these plus points were happening with this drug for a long term. And it was used frequently in other autoimmune disorders like RA, rheumatoid arthritis and all. And in a study which comprised of almost 5,000 patients with rheumatoid arthritis, this drug, when given, was able to prevent the onset of diabetes by 77%. All these points go to prove that this drug will be really useful. And instead of beating on the insulin therapy and peri-insulin zone, we come out of that and go to a broader perspective of using this molecule, which has been approved also of late. Now, the questions before us will be, how far this molecule will be useful in our practice, in our clinical practice, number one. How efficacious is the drug? What is glycemic efficacy? And which stage of diabetes can you introduce this drug? Right in the start or in the middle, or when it will be best suited? Whether it will produce hypoglycemic episodes when combined with sulfonylureas, insulins, and other drugs. And what's the long-term safety? Because we know this drug was used right and left. Even I was taking hydroxychloroquine in the COVID era, first wave, as a preventive dose. A lot of hype was created about his cardiotoxicity and all. Now, diabetes, which is known to be a cardiotoxic disease by itself, this metabolic, the continuum involves both the kidneys and the heart. How far this drug can be used with benefit in such a continuum? All these questions will be answered by the speaker of the day, Dr. G. Shanmugam sir. Very happy to have you with us, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us for the 101st meeting. He's MD, DM Endocrinology, MD General Medicine, and DM Endocrinology from PG. From Chandigarh, the place to study endocrinology. His achievements is the best outgoing student in MBBS 2003-2004 in Tamil Nadu, Dr. MGR Medical University, topper anatomy 1999, more than 15 national and international publications, authored in several textbooks. He is a consultant and director of Magna Code, Clinics for Obesity, Diabetes and Endocrinology, Chennai, consultant in ESIC Medical College in KK Nagar. So with great pleasure, sir, we are invited to give the talk. Now the stage is yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, sir. Good evening to everyone. At the outset, I thank the team of Diabetes Club of Dindigul for giving me this opportunity. It would have been nice if it is a direct program, but anyway, due to this pandemic situation, we are doing the live webinar programs. And Dr. J.C. Sagar, sir, has clearly showed about the, just a minute. Whether my slides are visible?
So they are visible, yes.
Right. So Dr. J.C. Sagar, sir, briefly describe about this hydroxychloroquine. It's a very, very old molecule, almost it's in the medicine for almost 5 to 6 decades, and it's widely used in autoimmune condition, many autoimmune condition. And since last 1 year, probably when the COVID first wave came, even the layperson knows about hydroxychloroquine. It was one of the most commonly used over-the-counter drugs during the first wave. After that, it has been discarded. So what I am going to talk about today is how this hydroxychloroquine benefits in type 2 diabetes, what is its efficacy, how much HbA1c reduction we can expect with this, and most importantly, the safety part, because any molecule, the safety part is very, very important. So what are the safety data we have with this molecule, both in terms of retinal toxicity and cardiovascular toxicity. So before going to the talk, the first question is whether I am using this molecule for my patient, because that's very important. Because if I'm going to give a talk, so I should be comfortable with this molecule. So initially, when this molecule was promoted, I am not very much comfortable in writing this molecule, because usage of hydroxychloroquine in type 2 diabetes, it's very vague and it's not approved in other countries. But during my practice, I saw in many patients where I used hydroxychloroquine for reactive arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, patients used to develop hypoglycemia, and there used to be reduction in the dose of the OHS. And many, so with that experience, then I started using this molecule in few of my patients. Yeah, and then I saw that it's a very good HbA1c reduction, glycemic reduction, and patient who is not willing for insulin therapy after 2 or 3 OA days, if you put on this molecule, there is a significant reduction in the glycemic values. Then I started using this molecule in my patients. In last 3 to 4 years, I'm now using in this many patients, and most of them are doing very fine, and there is no major toxicity, and glycemic control is also very, very good. So saying this, I'll go into the topic. So as I told, this is being used in very widely in many indications. So it is there in the market since 1955. Mainly it is used in rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. And 2001 it's approved for RA, and 2006 it has been approved for polymorphic light eruption, and 2008 for SLE. And even before that, many people must be using for SLE, because I remember in 2004, 2005, when I was doing my MD, we used to use hydroxychloroquine for SLE or DLE and all. And 2014, DCGI India has approved this molecule for usage in diabetes mellitus. After the phase 3 trial, I will be discussing about that. So hydroxychloroquine at present in India is indicated as an adjunct to diet and exercise to improve glycemic control of patients on metformin and sulfonylurea combination in type 2 diabetes. So as a third drug, it has been approved. So what I'm going to discuss is, just in the first few slides, I'll discuss about the mechanism of action, how hydroxychloroquine leads to decrease in the blood glucose level, and efficacy data. Mainly, most of the data are from India, and there are few international data also. And a few recent studies, they are compared with these DP4 inhibitors and SGLT2 inhibitors. Most of them are Indian studies, so I'll discuss that. And after that, main thing, the safety part. So what are the safety data we have with this molecule? And controversies in COVID times. So sir already discussed about that. So hydroxychloroquine has been widely used during the COVID first wave, but there are some controversy related to the QT prolongation. So I'll discuss about that. And finally, cardiovascular protection. What are the data to say that actually this molecule protects the heart? So we don't have a dedicated cardiovascular outcome trial, but we have few data to say that hydroxychloroquine leads to improvement in the cardiac parameters. Hydroxychloroquine in diabetes. So how it acts? So it can act via 4 mechanisms. One is inhibition of insulin degradation. Second is reduction in inflammation. We all know that. Improvement in the insulin sensitivity, and 4th is beta cell preservation. We'll go one by one. So what exactly acts when insulin binds to its receptor? It is internalized by the insulin receptor complex, and there are a lot of insulin degrading enzymes are there, which leads to degradation of the insulin. So the insulin action ends when this insulin enzymes acts on this insulin. But what hydroxychloroquine does is, it goes and it leads to alkalinization, and it inhibits the insulin degradation enzymes. So what happens? This insulin is not degraded, and insulin is released, and it again acts on the insulin receptor. So this is one of the main action. So hydroxychloroquine via alkalinization leads to inactivation of the insulin degrading enzymes. So there is insulin action is upgraded. So this is what this slide shows. So with increase in the hydroxychloroquine concentration, there is a decrease in the percentage of insulin degradation, and there is a progressive increase in the insulin levels also. Second is reduction in the systemic inflammation. So this is what this drug is known for. So it's a very well-known action. So there is a significant reduction in the hsCRP, high-sensitive CRP. So at the baseline and after 6 months, you can see there is a significant reduction in hsCRP. So similarly, there is a significant reduction in the HbA1c level also. Third is improvement in the insulin sensitivity. Again, this is a randomized double-blinded study. So there you can see from the baseline, there is a significant change in the insulin sensitivity with the usage of hydroxychloroquine, whereas in placebo there is not much change. So it is statistically significant. So indirectly, it improves the beta cell function also. Again, from baseline, you can see there is improvement in the 45.4 improvement in the beta cell function disposition index compared to placebo. So again, this leads to this hydroxychloroquine probably via reduction in the systemic inflammation. There is a reduction in the improvement in the insulin sensitivity, and probably due to the decrease in glucotoxicity, there is improvement in the beta cell function also. So hydroxychloroquine improves the insulin sensitivity by 20% and beta cell function by 45%. And hydroxychloroquine also increases the adiponectin by 20%. We know that adiponectin is a favorable adipokines, so it leads to improvement in the insulin sensitivity. So probably via this mechanism also it improves the insulin sensitivity. And this is animal data where they compared diabetic treated with hydroxychloroquine or not treated with hydroxychloroquine. So this is a diabetic pancreas where the number of beta cells is very less and alpha cells are increased. But if we see the hydroxychloroquine treated beta cells, there is an increase in the number of beta cells and decrease in the number of alpha cells. So probably we are some direction on the pancreatic beta cell by decreasing the inflammation. Hydroxychloroquine also preserves the beta cell. So these are the four main mechanisms by which hydroxychloroquine reduces the blood glucose level. So first thing is mainly it inhibits the insulin degradation. Second is it decreases overall systemic inflammation. Third is it improves the insulin sensitivity. Fourth is some direct action on the beta cell. So coming to the second part, efficacy, because we are treating a disease, so efficacy is very, very important. So the first question will be how much HbA1c this is leading to and whether this molecule is better than or comparable to the other standard molecules. So this is a phase 3 trial done in India. After this study only, the DCGI has approved this molecule. So here they have taken type 2 diabetes already on metformin with either glimepiride or gliclazide, but still HbA1c is not under control. The HbA1c between 7.5 to 13. So they randomized the patient to either hydroxychloroquine or pioglitazone. It's a 24-week data. So fasting plasma glucose, you can see the reduction in the hydroxychloroquine group is almost 20 milligram, whereas in pioglitazone also 20, it's comparable. And postprandial glucose also, the reduction in the hydroxychloroquine is 38, whereas in pioglitazone is 25. Again, it's comparable. And HbA1c reduction 0.87% with hydroxychloroquine, and with pioglitazone in 0.9%. So it's almost comparable with the pioglitazone. So based on this phase 3 trial, because there is no significant side effects compared to pioglitazone also, so this molecule has been approved by the DCGI. This is a post-marketing study, phase 4 study. So here it's a 600 odd type 2 diabetes patient already on metformin plus sulfonylurea, and the patient has been put on hydroxychloroquine 400 milligram for 52 weeks. And in this study, they also divided the patient based on the HSCRP also, less than 3 and after 3. So they have done the sub-analysis also. So the HbA1c reduction, irrespective of the HSCRP, baseline HSCRP, whether it's less than 3 or more than 3, the HbA1c reduction is consistent, almost 0.9% at the end of 1 year. And the mean HbA1c reduction at the end of 24 weeks is 1.22 and end of 1 year is 0.91%. So here you can see there is at the end of 1 year, there is a good reduction in the HSCRP also and good reduction in the glycemic parameters, fasting plasma glucose, postprandial glucose and HbA1c also. And additional advantage, what is the additional advantage? If you see the data at the end of 1 year, there is a good reduction in the total cholesterol and a good reduction in the triglyceride levels. And there is a good reduction in LDL, almost 13 milligram, and non-HDL also, it's almost 15 milligram reduction in the with usage of hydroxychloroquine. And adverse events, most are mild intensity, almost 84% of the adverse effects are very, very mild, and mostly it's gastrointestinal related. And 10 patients reported hypoglycemia, all were mild hypoglycemia. And 8 non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy cases were reported, all were mild, and they were unlikely related to hydroxychloroquine. So again, this data shows that this is a very efficacious molecule, almost 0.9% reduction in the HbA1c with good safety profile. And it's another data, again published from India, almost 1,500 patients, and it's a 24-week data. Again, at the end of 24 weeks, there is a good reduction in the HbA1c, almost 1.4%. And the people who had more than 0.45% fall of HbA1c at the end of 24 weeks is almost 80%. And more than 1% at the end of week 24 is almost 62%. And target A1C achievement less than 7% has been achieved with 34% of the people, and less than 8 has been achieved in 73% of the people. Again, in this data also, in this study also, the reduction in the improvement in the liver parameters has been documented. There is a good reduction in the total cholesterol, almost 14 milligram per deciliter reduction in the LDL. Again, very good reduction, and a mild increase in the HDL. and non-HDL almost 20 milligram per deciliter. Almost has been changes in lipid profile has been replicated as in the previous study. And again, most of the adverse events are gastrointestinal related, and they were very, very mild. So what are the international data? So again, Dr. Segar sir already discussed this. So in this study, they analyzed the patients with rheumatoid arthritis, and they followed the patient for almost 4 years. So in this data, people could never use hydroxychloroquine. They compared with the patient who ever used, at some point of time, they used hydroxychloroquine. The patient could regularly use hydroxychloroquine for more than 4 years. So if we see the data, there is almost 77% lower risk of developing diabetes in patients with who are using hydroxychloroquine compared to people who have never used hydroxychloroquine. So it's a very, very significant number. And even in 1990, the data are there. For patients who are resistant to anti-diabetic drug after glibenclamide and insulin, the people are used hydroxychloroquine, and they have seen that there is a significant reduction in the HbA1c to the tune of 3.3%, and insulin requirement also decreased by 30%. So it's way back in 1990. So recently there are a lot of data. Again, they added hydroxychloroquine after using maximum sulfonylureas. Again, there is a good reduction in the HbA1c, almost 1% at the end of 6 months, and there is a good improvement in the LDL levels also. This is again one international data where they compared hydroxychloroquine versus pioglitazone after using maximum tolerated dose of metformin and sulfonylurea. This is why the DCGI is approved. This molecule should be used after metformin and sulfonylurea, because most of the data are like this. They used hydroxychloroquine after metformin plus sulfonylurea. So in this study, again, both drugs were well tolerated and significantly improved HbA1c level. Hydroxychloroquine almost 1.2% reduction, and weight loss is 0.3 kg weight loss with hydroxychloroquine, but with pioglitazone there is a 3.3 kg weight gain. So there are again few studies where they used add-on to metformin plus sulfonylurea, as already described in the previous study. So there are a lot of studies from India. Most of these studies are from India after this DCGI approval, because hydroxychloroquine use for diabetes has increased. So many people have done a lot of studies. So again, consistently you can see there is almost 1% reduction in the HbA1c. And in this study, they have added to multiple OADs like metformin plus sulfonylurea plus the pioglitazone, DPP-4 inhibitors, and almost 5 drugs. So here, after adding the hydroxychloroquine, there is almost 2.3% reduction in the HbA1c. Again, in routine clinical practice, we can't do this. Usually, after 3 drugs, usually we go for insulin. But again, this data shows that there is a good response even after using multiple OADs, and even there is a good reduction in the body weight, also almost 4.6 kgs. And here another one good study. So metformin plus glimepiride, then they randomize the patient to receive either hydroxychloroquine or one group. Second group, they uptitrate metformin to 2 grams per day. Third group, they upgraded glimepiride 2 milligram to 4 milligram. So if we see these data, so HbA1c reduction is almost same. So the people who has received hydroxychloroquine, they achieved HbA1c of 6.5%, and metformin uptitration group achieved HbA1c 6.8, and glimepiride uptitration achieved HbA1c of 6.6%. So even compared to doubling the dose of glimepiride, the hydroxychloroquine 400 milligram also achieved the same HbA1c level. So this data shows that this molecule is equally efficacious as sulfonylureas. So what are the comparison with the DPP-4 inhibitors? So again, most of the studies are from India. So they are compared with various gliptins like tenligliptin, sitagliptin, vildagliptin, etc. So consistently, if you see the HbA1c reduction with hydroxychloroquine is better than most of the gliptins. So from 1.8 with hydroxychloroquine versus 1.6 with tenli, 0.92 with hydroxychloroquine versus 0.8 with sitagliptin. So vildagliptin also almost same, 1.3% with hydroxychloroquine versus 1.1 with the vildagliptin. Again, various data. So this is one switchover study where they initially used tenligliptin plus metformin plus glimepiride. Then they replaced tenligliptin with hydroxychloroquine. They was shown that there is additional 1.1% reduction in the HbA1c after switching from tenligliptin to hydroxychloroquine. So again, these are very good data to show that this molecule is better than DPP-4 inhibitors. And there are few data comparing with the SGLT2 inhibitors like dapagliflozin and canagliflozin. Again, this data shows that hydroxychloroquine is slightly better than the SGLT2 inhibitors. HbA1c reduction is slightly better than the SGLT2 inhibitors. And there is good insulin reduction also with the usage of hydroxychloroquine. So in the SGLT2 inhibitors, there is a reduction of 8 units average insulin dose, whereas in hydroxychloroquine, it's almost 12.8 insulin dose reduction. So insulin reduction is also better with the hydroxychloroquine compared to the dapagliflozin. Hydroxychloroquine and insulin reduction. So again, various studies where they added hydroxychloroquine to insulin. So consistently, you can see there is almost 25% reduction in the insulin dose. So this study shows that after adding hydroxychloroquine to glargine plus sitagliptin plus metformin, there is 9.9 units average reduction. And this is also again sitagliptin plus metformin, 7.3% reduction. So again, this data shows there is a good reduction. And this is another one interesting study where they compared 400 milligram versus 200 milligram. So here the HbA1c reduction is definitely better with 400 milligram, 1.3% versus 0.8%, because so far we don't have this kind of data. So comparing 400 milligram versus 200 milligram. So in this study, the HbA1c reduction is better with 400 milligram versus 200 milligram. And insulin reduction is also better with 400 milligram, almost 10 units versus 3.6 units with the 200 milligram. So coming to the important part, because efficacy, we have data, a lot of recent data from India. So and a lot of comparison data also with DPP4 inhibitors and SGLT2 inhibitors. So if you see consistently, the HbA1c reduction is from 0.9 to 1.3% in most of the studies. Even we have a 1-year study which showing that 0.9% reduction. So definitely this molecule is moderate to good efficacy in glycemic control. So there is no doubt about it. Even in clinical practice, we do see this kind of reduction with the hydroxychloroquine. So now coming to the hydroxychloroquine safety. So coming to the hyperpigmentation, so this is again a concern. Rheumatologists know this because with usage of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, the physicians are worried about hyperpigmentation. So, but this data shows that the incidence is very less, 7.3% after 6.1 years use of hydroxychloroquine, but mostly it's secondary to bruising or ecchymosis. So the incidence is very, very less. Coming to the most important concern, that is a retinal toxicity, because if we talk about chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine, the first thing comes to our mind is retinal toxicity. But the difference is in this chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, this this molecule hydroxyl group. So hydroxyl group in H2 to make it different from the chloroquine. So due to this hydroxyl group, it has a limited ability to cross the blood retinal barrier, and also it causes fast clearance from the retinal pigmental cells. And what data says that the chance of developing retinal toxicity is very less than 1% risk in the first 5 years, or less than 2% risk up to 10 years if the patient is taking less than 5 milligram per kilogram of hydroxychloroquine per day. So American Association of Ophthalmologists, again, the toxicity is more if the patient is taking more than 500 milligram per kilogram, and duration of use is more than 5 years. And there is a subnormal GFR. Again, if there is a reduced eGFR, again, it's better to avoid the drug because the chance of retinal toxicity is more. In concomitant drugs, tamoxifen use is very rare. And a patient is already having macular disease, again, the chance of toxicity is more. Again, we need to rule out all these factors if you are starting the patient on hydroxychloroquine. And what they are advising, how to screen it, baseline screening is important, and fundus examination within the first year of use. And you can do the spectral domain OCT if maculopathy is present. After this first year of fundus, this one baseline screening, if you do the screening, if everything is okay, you can do the screening, repeat screening after 5 years of use. And if they have any major risk factor like decreased eGFR or maculopathy, you can do the screening in between. Otherwise, in between, no need to screen for the retinal toxicity, particularly with respect to hydroxychloroquine. Otherwise, routinely we do yearly screening for retinopathy. But if you are concerned about this retinal toxicity due to hydroxychloroquine, baseline screening, probably you can do the first fundus examination within the first year of use. After that, after 5 years of use, you can do this annual screening. Same thing has been told by Royal College of Ophthalmologists also. So if the patient is using more than 5 years, we should do annual monitoring. And if the patient has additional risk factors for retinal toxicity, then we need to be more careful. And same thing, if the patient is using concomitant tamoxifen use or eGFR is less, or if dose is more than 5 milligram per kilogram per day, then we have to be very, very careful. Again, this is Royal College of Ophthalmologists. Again, it depends on the daily dose and duration. So no need to worry about the risk factors. And again, this is important. Even after 5 years of use, the incremental annual risk of toxicity must be looked at rather than the cumulative risk. For example, if the patient is taking for more than 5 years, 6 years, no need to worry that the patient is already taking 5 years, 6 years, so we should stop the medication. At that point, again, assess the risk, whether the patient is having other risk factors like the dose requirement, and the patient is having other retinopathy or macular disease or EGFR, then you should think about this, whether to continue the drug or not to continue the drug. The risk is very less. Even at this data shows that the 1% risk only after 10 years of use, and there is only 4% of risk after 20 years of use. After 5 years also, do annual monitoring and calculate the risk, annual risk, whether the patient is at risk for toxicity, then decide about continuing the drug. And no need to stop the therapy because you are given for 5 years or 6 years and all. Controversies rising in COVID times, mainly this QT prolongation and arrhythmia. So we all very well know that COVID-19 itself can lead to myocardial injury and it can lead to arrhythmogenic potential. So these patients are at risk for QT prolongation and cardiac arrhythmias, etc. So, but what happened during this COVID first wave was the patients has been given azithromycin also, and the patient has been given hydroxychloroquine also. The people are more worried about the QT prolongation. But if you see the safety of hydroxychloroquine in COVID-19, because the first 3 to 6 months, many people used hydroxychloroquine in all over the world, and many data we have. Even this have this meta-analysis of sorry for the technical issue. There was no cardiac toxicity was reported, and occurrence of QT prolongation and cardiomyopathy was not reported. So this is a meta-analysis from 9 cities, and we have to be careful. But in older age, female gender, if the patient is requiring high daily dose or there is underlying cardiac or renal disease. And QT prolongation is very rare with hydroxychloroquine, and if the patient has other risk factors, like if we are using high dose of hydroxychloroquine, or if the patient is simultaneously taking QT prolonging drug like azithromycin, antihistaminic, antipsychotics, those are very important. So again, in our clinical practice, we need to remember this also. Now, if the patient, because many of our patients may be taking antipsychotics or antihistaminics, which they may not disclose, but we should ask those history. And if the patients are taking that, then we need to do better to do the baseline ECG and calculate the QTC. If the QTC is already prolonged, then we need to be very careful. Again, this is from the European Society of Cardiology, arrhythmic safety of hydroxychloroquine in COVID-19 from different clinical settings. Again, they have shown that there is no significant decrease in increase in the QTC interval with the usage of hydroxychloroquine, and the arrhythmic burden is overall low, but it is skewed towards the ICU patients. So in sick patients, we have to be careful. Again, now this question doesn't come because usually we are not using hydroxychloroquine in COVID-19 patient, but already patient taking hydroxychloroquine for other indications like diabetes and rheumatic, we need to be careful. If the patient is very sick, already having going towards ICU or having hypoxia, then we need to be careful. So we need to do the ECG, and we need to monitor the ECG regularly. And we all know this in USA, they used to have this one, frequent adverse event reporting system, FAERS. Again, they analyzed almost more than 13 million reports over last 50 years from FAERS reported. And there is no significant safety signal related to QT prolongation or death due to usage of hydroxychloroquine. Long-term usage of hydroxychloroquine has been consistently linked to CV and metabolic benefits. The risk of QT prolongation is very, very rare. Same thing from the European Medical, UK Society also. The frequency of cardiac disorders is not known. What they have mentioned in their packing is, sometimes it can lead to cardiomyopathy, or chronic toxicity can lead to biventricular hypertrophy, but drug withdrawal may lead to recovery. But again, frequency of cardiac disorder is not known. Not known means the frequency cannot be estimated from the available data. Its incidence is very, very rare. So we have again related to the QT prolongation, we have very good data to say that it's very, very safe. There is not much of concern related to QT prolongation. But in people with taking some other drugs like azithromycin or antihistaminic or antipsychotics, we need to be extra careful. It's better to do the baseline ECG and monitor the ECG also. So saying this, what are this, this molecule has any cardiovascular protection? So this molecule again doesn't have any cardiovascular outcome trial published already, but this is an again exploratory data, because we know that the people are using hydroxychloroquine for a long time in a rheumatoid arthritis patient. So again, they compared hydroxychloroquine non-user from hydroxychloroquine user patients. They have found that there is 72% decrease in the risk of cardiovascular disease in the people who are using hydroxychloroquine versus non-user. Again, very significant data to say that this molecule probably multiple reasons. One is the reduction in overall systemic inflammation and improving the insulin sensitivity. Probably it is leading to a decrease in the cardiovascular disease. So again, this data shows there is a significant decrease in the cardiovascular disease. Again, another data, retrospective data, though in people who are using rheumatoid arthritis, it has a significant protective effect for all cardiovascular events. And it has a significant protective effect for myocardial infarction, stroke, and venous thrombosis. Again, few data showed that usage of hydroxychloroquine has some antithrombotic effects also. So the people who are using anticoagulants, again, it is very important in the current situation, because routinely anticoagulants are prescribed now after COVID infection. So hydroxychloroquine also has some antithrombotic properties. So people who are using hydroxychloroquine antithrombotics, we should educate them, because there is a slight increase in the chance of bleeding tendencies. So various data have shown that there is a decrease in the risk of coronary artery disease, CVD, and reduction in the atrial fibrillation. As I told, reduction in the incidence of thrombosis in people who are on hydroxychloroquine compared to people who has not received hydroxychloroquine. So this is ongoing trial, OXY trial. 2,500 patients are hospitalized for myocardial infarction. So they has been put on hydroxychloroquine 300 milligram per day versus placebo for 1 year follow-up. Again, it's like a cardiovascular outcome trial. They are monitoring the patient for 350 cardiovascular events. So probably in 1 or 2 years, we will have the outcome of this trial. So when should we be careful? The usage of hydroxychloroquine during pregnancy and lactation is not indicated. It's not safe. And again, safety is not established in children. And elderly people, again, with reduction in EGFR, we have to be very careful, because as I told, EGFR less than 60, the chance of retinal toxicity is more. So we have to be careful. And people with renal and hepatic disease, if you see the labeling, the no dosage modification is recommended. Only they have mentioned observed caution in patients with renal and hepatic disease. So my take is better to avoid in those cases, because we don't have much data on those data. In contraindication, known hypersensitive to 4-aminoquinoline groups. Already, if there is hypersensitive chloroquine, etc., it's better to avoid. Already existing retinopathy or pre-existing maculopathy, we have it's contraindicated. And previously, if there is any retinal or visual field changes attributable to 4-aminoquinoline compound, again, we have to be, it's contraindicated. Insulin or anti-diabetic drugs, as Shar was asking initially. So definitely, if the patient is on sulfonylurea or insulin, it's better to decrease the dose, because the chance of hypoglycemia is increased. I showed the data also. Even patients on sulfonylurea and metformin, there's a very good reduction in HbA1c. Even some patients, there is almost 2 to 3% reduction in HbA1c, and almost 25% reduction in the insulin dose in most of the studies. So it's better to reduce the dose if you are starting the hydroxychloroquine, and then fine tune the dose. Drugs that prolong the QT interval and other arrhythmogenic drugs, we have to be careful. So do the baseline ECG and monitor the ECG frequently. Antiplatelet, anticoagulant, again, as I told, the cautions need to be exercised, because the hydroxychloroquine itself has an antithrombotic property. So summary, efficacy-wise, hydroxychloroquine, we have a lot of data from India phase 3 and phase 4, lot of comparison data with other molecule, which shows that consistently there is a 0.9 to 1.3% reduction in the HbA1c, and additional benefits on lipid is also consistently shown in many data, and there is a marginal weight reduction in many studies. And the cardiovascular benefit, we don't have a direct study in diabetic population or CVOT trials, but in RA patients, it has shown that there is a 72% reduction in the cardiovascular events compared to the people who has not used hydroxychloroquine, and this OXY trial is ongoing. So in which patients to use? So now the guidelines is the DCGI approval is for patients already on 2 OHs, particularly in metformin and sulfonylurea. If not under control, then we can start the patient on hydroxychloroquine. So basically, it can be started in any patient if there is no contraindication. Already I told about the contraindication, reduced EGFR, previous sensitive to chloroquine, or if already retinopathy is there, it's better to avoid this molecule. Otherwise, it can be started in any type 2 diabetes patient inadequately controlled on 2 or more drugs, including insulin. And safety-wise, hyperpigmentation, it's not much. And retinopathy, lot of safety data are there. So do the baseline screening and do the fundus after 1 year. And if the maculopathy is there, then you have to do more frequently. If everything is okay, then do the screening after 5 years only. And even after 5 years, do the annual screening. Again, no need to stop the therapy because of thinking the cumulative effects can lead to retinopathy. We have to assess the risk every year. So decide whether we can continue the drug or not, because the data shows that even after 10 years, 5 years, it's only 1%, and 10 years, it's 2%. And even after 20 years, the risk of retinopathy is less than 4%. So the same thing has been recommended by American and Royal College of Ophthalmologists also. And if used for more than 5 years, include the OCTs also in the annual screening. Thank you for the patients listening. If any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
That was a great presentation, sir. Excellent presentation. Your flow was so smooth and so nice, and we just thoroughly enjoyed it. You started how the drug starts acting. You started the mechanism of action. Then you told it's very efficacious. In fact, bring down the HbA1c almost pointed to 1%. Safety is very good. You blasted all the hypes which created about the cardiac safety and whatnot. And a lot of controversies all been leveled by you. And such large trials have proved again that it's quite cardiac safe. And you took extra pains to prove that it's really CV protective. In fact, not even hurt it, it actually protects the heart. That's what you arrived at. That's a beautiful thing, sir. And definitely in my next patient of diabetes tomorrow, whose HbA1c is more than 9 or 10, not controlled on metformin and sulfonylureas, you got exotic molecules like DP4s and SGLTs. I have one more option now. Right from tomorrow, I can start using the molecule, and it's pretty nice, sir. We got a few questions, sir. Can you use HCQC in pregnant ladies? Please, you already answered. It's not needed in pregnant ladies. It's not indicated.
Yes, contraindicated.
And next question is, in this era of fancy molecules as SGLT, does HCQ has a role in DM management? That's one daughter has asked the question, sir.
Yes, see, again, in our country, if you see, ideally after 3 drugs, you have to put the patient on insulin. But how many of our patients are ready to accept that? It's very difficult for in our clinical practice to convince. Even after you talk to them after 10 or 15 minutes, they will go back to the square one. They will hear their drivers, neighbors, relatives, everyone, but they don't listen to us. So we are some way in our clinical practice, we have to go away from the guidelines, this one. So I showed on data also, they used this molecule after metformin, sulfonylureas, DPP4 inhibitors, SGLT2 inhibitors, and voglibos also there. I didn't mention that. So almost after 5 drugs, they use this molecule. Still, there is a significant reduction in the HbA1c. So in our clinical practice, definitely we'll do come across many patients, even after 3 or 4 OADs, there is no significant reduction in the HbA1c. Definitely you can try, particularly in patients with obesity, where you think significant insulin resistant component is there, definitely this molecule will help. So even after using DP4 and SGLT2, you can add, because the mechanism of action is completely different.
And another point you told that increase the dose of glimepiride by 2 mg when compared to this is much better. When you go for high post with glimepiride, you save all the high posts by adding HCQC in that place. So that's also very nice, sir. And another question is, what's your clinical experience with HCQ? Dr. Panichami from Trichy has asked the question.
That's what I told. Initially, I was very much skeptical to use this molecule, but I very well remember one patient with rheumatoid arthritis. She developed hypoglycemia after starting the hydroxychloroquine. Then I reviewed the literature. Then I started using in many of my patients where I was facing difficulty in controlling this one, because many patients do have this one intolerance to DPP-4 inhibitors and urinary infections, gentle infection with SGLT2 inhibitor, where we can't use this molecule. And if you see, 3 to 4 years before, we are using SGLT2 inhibitors mainly with diabetes with obesity, not like now, where after having many data, now we are using in most of our patients. But that time, 3 to 4 years back, we are very limited usage of SGLT2 inhibitor. So in those time, I started using hydroxychloroquine. The patients are doing well. Now I have even 3 to 4 years follow-up of many patients. They are doing really well, very well.
And another question is, sir, is there any chance could we give hydroxychloroquine 4 mg as a second-line drug? As a second-line drug?
Again, if possibly, if you think the patient is having some arthritis problem and obesity where insulin resistance is more, then probably you can use hydroxychloroquine as a second-line drug. But now with the evidences after metformin, obviously you'll go for SGLT2 inhibitor unless the patient is contraindicated. So if there is a contraindication for SGLT2 inhibitors or DPP-4 inhibitors, probably I'll go for hydroxychloroquine or sulfonylurea, vice versa, because if hypoglycemia risk is more, so only in selected population, I will say, because we have very good molecules, DP4, SGLT2 inhibitors. So if there is a contraindication, patient is not tolerating or contraindication, and if the patient is at risk for hypoglycemia, then probably after metformin, hydroxychloroquine I will use.
Yes, sir. And you told in great detail about the ophthalmic the toxicity of the molecule. Have you encountered any the tinnitus with this one, sir? Hydroxychloroquine usage?
So far, I have not come across, sir.
Okay.
Theoretically, it can cause, but so far, I have not come across, sir.
Another question is just now come. Hydroxychloroquine HVQ use more than 5 years. Is it effect for the retinal problem? This you are just now told in detail.
Yeah, so assess the risk every year. So it's not, don't worry about the cumulative risk, because we know that SLE patients, RA patients are using for decades. So don't worry about the cumulative effect. So after 5 years, we have to do annual screening because to assess the risk. So whether to continue the drug or not, assess the risk, take the call on annual basis.
That's great, sir. So great, sir. We thoroughly enjoyed it. Very happy to we'll like to have some more time once again, some time later. Probably personal meet when things become normal. We'll have to invite you to Dindigul and have host you with us for a day or two. And
sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Over to Secretary. Yes, ma'am.
What is the role of this hydroxychloroquine in type 1 diabetic patients? Since it is anti-inflammatory action is also there. Will you advise it for type 1 diabetic patients?
No, sir. Unless patient has associated autoimmune disease, no, sir. For diabetes control for type 1 diabetes, insulin is the main. If it's adult type 1 diabetes, if there is a addition of insulin resistance, probably metformin or pioglitazone I will add. But no other trial drugs I will add in type 1 diabetes, sir, unless we have data.
Yeah. And also it has, we have shown from the data, it is one of the very good efficacious drug of HbA1c reduction between 0.8 to 1.3%. Even this gliptins, gliflozins, they have shown reduction between the range of 0.5 to 0.8%. We have shown it is a very good reduction in the HbA1c. Data have not been, are not there. But what is your opinion as a HCQ as a first-line drug?
Yeah, that's what I told, sir. In certain populations, because we don't have much data to use as a second-line drug, because most of the data says that this molecule has been used after metformin and sulfonylurea only. So we don't have data for as a first-line or second-line drug. So without data, it's very difficult to say because in the forum we can't advise. So patient to patient basis, we can take a call. If there's a contraindication or patient has some really good indication for HCQs to use, then probably we can take a call. Unless there is evidences, it's very difficult to say that we can use as such use as a second molecule in day-to-day clinical practice. Because most of the studies are small studies. Most of the studies, the phase 3 studies included almost 300 patients. Other studies are very, very small scale studies. So based on that, we can't say that it can be used as a first line or second line. Sir.
Okay, final question. Since it has been shown very good efficacy, what do you feel, why it has not picked up? Because our patients, when day-to-day clinical practice, all the patients come with multiple OADs, 3 OAD, 4 OADs are very common in our clinical practice. Even 4 OAD patient with the failing declining the beta cell function, HbA1c 9%. It is very difficult to convince a patient to initiate the insulin. As is shown one study that 4-5 OADs, there is one very good reduction. With all these good data, why this molecule has not picked up in the...
The main problem is one is the side effect profile. The people are worried about this retinal toxicity and this hyperpigmentation part. They're very much worried about it. And that's why most of the people are not using this. But actually, the rheumatologists are using this for many decades, and it's a very, very safe molecule. But even at the back of the mind, whenever the chloroquine comes to question, always the retinal toxicity comes to our mind. So that's why the most of the physicians, the diabetologists or endocrinologists are not still using it. But now the trend is changing, and even our endocrinologist forum, many people have started using this hydroxychloroquine off late, seeing the benefits. So probably in the future, if you have more data, CVOT outcome rate, they are doing this another one study for CVOT. So probably once those comes, then probably the people may prescribe this more in number.
Beautiful, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Over to you. Back to Anta, ma'am.
Thank you. So this drug, hydroxychloroquine, I ordered and I had it for the wave of COVID. And then it got stagnated because we stopped using hydroxychloroquine. Then the representative was pestering me to use it for diabetes. Then I searched in the literature and then I got convinced and I started using. But I use like 200 milligram by daily. And sometimes when I feel uncomfortable, I reduce it to 200 milligram OD. And now with all your data and the presentation, I will be confidently using hydroxychloroquine now, sir. 400 milligram once daily. Thanks, sir. That was a wonderful presentation. And I would like to call upon Dr. Satish Kumar, our Finance Secretary, to deliver the thank you address.
Good evening, everybody. Our mentors, Dr. Muralidharan sir and J.C. Segar sir, used to say, the topics which we discuss in the Diabetes Club should be practiced the next day. Really, sir, this is a very new molecule. And to be a practical point, it was underused due to the inertia of the practitioners, because lack of knowledge. So your piece of information will guide us to go in this direction. And you have clearly explained us about the safety profile of the drug, and the efficacy of the drug also is beyond doubt. So thank you for the speaker who has given us elaborately on this topic and enlightened us in this and guide us a new drug in the armamentarium against the fight of diabetes. So I would congratulate our secretary, Dr. Anita Madam, for choosing this topic and going an extra mile in diabetic club history, making it social media active, having a Facebook page and a YouTube channel will make this program reach to leaps and bounds. So I congratulate our secretary and our patrons who has selected a genuine person for the fittest position. I thank every participant of this meeting, and I thank our sponsor IPCA for having arranged this meeting. I thank one and all, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And I once again thank you, our CME sponsor, IPCA, for this wonderful CME today. And thank you, sir. Thanks, everyone. We will end the meeting with this.
Bye.
Well done, new team, Anita, Satish, Kamarad, very nice.
Great time, excellent time. As I told you, right from tomorrow, you can look for patients to put on this drug. That's the message that clearly conveys. Thank you, the speaker and Anita ma'am. Thank you.